Today, we are joined by Mesha Moinirad. Mesha, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to come and speak to us, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Awesome. So, Mesha, you've got a super interesting story that we want to kind of expand and go into. You've got an incredible mindset, something that has kind of drawn me towards you. Something I've seen a lot on your social channels and things like this. And I just want to know a little bit more about that. I want to, for our viewers to understand a little bit more about how you work and what makes you tick. And obviously the things that ultimately enable you to live on form and do your day-to-day things. So should we start with a little bit about yourself? Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about your background, what you do, where you came from, how that sort of evolved?
Yes. So my name's Mesha, as Phil said. I am 30 years old, which feels extremely old. Hitting that 30, it's a scary time, isn't it? And especially in lockdown, it's a bit weird. But I live in Weymouth, so Weymouth's down the coast in Dorset. I'm in the UK. And for a day-to-day job, I'm a personal trainer. So I primarily do personal training, but what I really focus on is rehabilitation. And I do rehab because of, I've lived through the experiences of what other people that I coach have been through. And I think that's really, really important. I can relate to those people. And I probably have people travel within the catchment area of maybe an hour and a half of where I coach. So that's what I do for a day to day. But I also now have a medical product, which I'm sure we'll delve into later on in the podcast. But I developed that due to a condition and due to, a lot of things that I've been through over the last 5 years in order to help other people in my situation.
That's awesome. I know a little bit about this. So what we're going to do is we're going to just hold off a little bit on that before we delve into that. But what I want to know a little bit more about is about you. I want to know a little bit about your mindset. I want to know a little bit about the things that drive you on a daily basis to do what you do. Obviously, you're a trainer, you're a coach, you're dealing with people and trying to assist and help people on a day-to-day basis with challenges that they may have. But ultimately, where you've obviously gone through this journey of mental challenges, physical challenges, and they've all sort of tied in together. And how has that evolved? How have you come to that point where, was it a mindset switch? Was it something that you've always had? Have you always been very positive about things? Have you always had this kind of growth mindset, or is it something that you've had to develop?
Yeah, one of the main things I've always been passionate about is helping people. From when I left school, I knew that I wanted to do something where I was working with people and actively helping people in any walk of life. That could have been in any industry. I think if I didn't find personal training, I would have found it within something else. So that has always been sort of ingrained in me, whether that was to do with my upbringing. I'm half Iranian, half Welsh. So naturally, I'm quite a family person from that as well. But I've always loved helping people. So when I found personal training, I went from, having no hours and no experience out of university to having probably 50 hours of personal training within 2 months. And I think it was just that kind of, my dad's always said it, is if you're looking to help people and you're really passionate about something, people will be naturally drawn to you. And I think that's happened to me throughout the whole of my career and to where I am stood today is, I've always seen things as, I've always tried to look at things in a positive light. Don't get me wrong, I've had days where I'd sit there and mope and sulk and feel sorry for myself. But as soon as I had that moment, I've tried to perceive all the positive things I do have as opposed to looking at all the negatives. It's very easy to sit there and look at all the negative things that are happening. Whereas if you actually pull out the positives, I tend to find that, those positives far outweigh all the negative things. And there's people in a lot worse situations than what you are. And I found that in my condition and what I've been through. I've had, hell over the last sort of 6 years or 8 years even now. Jesus, that's gone really quick. But I've always looked at my condition, and then because I talk to other people and realise I'm actually in a fantastic situation where I am right now, and I have to be grateful for that in a way.
So before we get into your condition, you can expand and explain what that entails on a day-to-day basis for you and what it means from you from a physical perspective and potentially even a mental perspective. Before we get into that, has that mindset always been there, or was that something that you came about through through hardship or through challenges or whatever it might be? I mean, if we go back to Mesha, school, Mesha, right? So when you were at school, how was your outlook on things at school, and how was your life then? Were you challenged? Were the things there was the barriers in your way? Were the things, how did you focus then?
Yeah, how was there really a ticking point for me? I had a really good upbringing. Like, I got a loving family. Like, I'm very lucky in that sense. Really supportive family. For me, I went through college quite happy-go-lucky, class clown, but always got my work done. Pardon?
What did you study at university college?
I studied sports science, sports coaching.
Okay, cool.
At college and stuff. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, to be honest. I just knew that I wanted to be working with people. Some of my friends were doing that. I knew I wanted to do something within fitness, but I sort of just bounced through college. Had one too many nights out. Was getting in a bit of trouble, whatnot. And it was the same at university. In my first year at university, I'm completely different to where I was then. I was going out 5 times a week, just being a typical student, and almost just got through that first year. And then, it was only really for me, the biggest change and biggest shift for me was when I did get ill. That was when things completely changed for me, because all of a sudden I went from being, a young lad in their early 20s, who was going to the gym 5-6 times a week, pretty arrogant, a little bit self-obsessed, as you are when you're doing like sort of bodybuilding scenario things, when you're training a lot. We were learning stuff at university and then applying it to ourselves. So, I was proud of my six pack. It was only until I got really ill that my mindset completely shifted, and I probably matured 10, 15 years in the course of maybe 2 months, when things became a reality for me. And when you go from having a completely normal life with no health implications to someone who's in ICU in intensive care and given a 20% chance of survival, things change very drastically. And those things can happen in a blink of an eye. I've been in ICU twice now. And, the first time I didn't even see it coming. It literally, I was in my 3rd year at university, and out of the blue, I pretty much ended up in intensive care fighting for my life. And that for me was the main ticking point and the main shift in my mindset. And then things from there have just, I do think that shift in my mindset has helped things evolve tenfold. In my career, in my focus, in what I want to do, in the next part of my life, really.
And do you think that was almost a humility thing? Was it a humbling moment? Was it a moment where you kind of self-reflected and sort of looked at your outlook on life or the way that you were as a person? And did you change according to that? Was there a question around mortality? I know that's something that I've challenged myself with over the last probably 5 to 10 years, where there was never ever this fear of mortality. There was never this fear of death. There was never, and then all of a sudden there is, and it wasn't an age thing. It was more of a stage of life thing. So was it like that? Was it almost like this light staring you in the face saying, look, Mesha, you need to change your mentality. You need to change your outlook. You need to change, the way that you are. I mean, to me, you come across as a very humble guy. On your social channels and things like this, same thing comes across, and maybe that is that the new you versus would the old you have been very, very different?
No, I don't think. I think I always had those core values ingrained in me. I've always had those there. They've always been there, but I feel like that time in my life unlocked them. And then because they unlocked them, it meant that because I was behind those feelings as well, my emotions had changed. And, I knew that what I wanted to do, I had more focus. I could really drive and push that. In school, for an example, I remember I was always told, always strengthen your weaknesses, work on your weaknesses. And I personally think that's a load of bollocks. For me, I'm very much like, work on your strengths. Like, those strengths are the things that you can really push them and amplify them. Like, I'm not a numbers guy. I actually think I had mild dyslexia in school for numbers, but it never got picked up on. That's not my kettle of fish. But talking to people, engaging with people, talking in front of people, and doing what I do on social media is my strengths. And that's why I think, in my day-to-day job, being a personal trainer and talking to people about their problems, I've been able to really lock in, and that's where my specialty is. But I wouldn't have found those things, I don't think, if I didn't become ill. I might have gone a completely different route in my life. But you know, it's one of those things. I do believe things happen for a reason. Like I think I'm sat here today for a reason, and it's almost like a circle of events of why you get to somewhere in life.
I think hardship plays a role, doesn't it? I think anybody who's experienced hardship, whatever, in whatever guise that comes, you know, hardship can come in so many different ways. And I think there's this notion with a lot of people to actually compare their hardship to others, and you know, they like to look at themselves and almost pity themselves in somewhere and look at others and go, yeah, but. And again, this is this kind of positive outlook that we're trying to sort of tap into here and understand a little bit about where that came from and what caused it. And we can't, you know, you can't hope hardship on anybody. You know, I always think, you know, with the kids, I always like to think the kids are challenged. You know, in whatever way, shape, or form that is, whether it's challenged at school through things that are more complex and more difficult than they're used to, you know, to the mentality that we've had. You know, I did sports science as well, and it was progression, you know, kind of this progressive overload that we talk about in weight training and things like this is the same thing that we apply to in life. Is that life is this progressive overload, right? If we want to develop as people and nurture who we are and things like this, and this progressive overload applies to life, but at times this progressive overload is like someone just dropping a ton of weight on you. And obviously that ton of weight came for you when, you know, we had a discussion beforehand about, you know, you were actually meant to be coming to one of my seminars, right? And
crazy,
you know,
crazy.
And was this all of a sudden out the blue that this occurred, or was this something that you kind of knew was creeping up and it had been diagnosed or whatever it might be? How did it transpire?
Yeah, so it's very strange, really. I was a complete student, you know, so student living. I was living with six flatmates at the time, and I was in the shape of my life. Like I was the best shape I ever been. And I woke up one morning and I just had this deep feeling in my groin. It was like really inset deep, and I didn't know what it was. I thought I was maybe severely constipated. I was like, that's a very strange feeling. I never felt it before. And then I went to the toilet expecting to excrete. And instead of doing that, I was actually sick. So I vomited in the sink, and I was like, "Ooh, that was weird." I didn't really think anything of it, to be honest. I thought maybe I've eaten something funny, because when you've never experienced ill health, you don't really know what it's like to be sick. And this is why, you know, when I try and explain certain things to my friends, like I have in the past when I was ill, they don't understand because they've never been put in that situation. They don't.
And I think people are almost a little bit dismissive of it, aren't they?
Yeah, they're a bit
They're
naive.
kind of like, "Oh, I've been sick, whatever. It'll just be something."
And
you walk away, right?
Typical male as well. You know, thinking just brush it off. I was never one to go to the doctors. I was never one to take medication. It didn't really interest me. I just thought I'd just get over it. You know, some people would take paracetamol till the sun comes home for any if or not, but I wasn't really that person. I preferred to just sort of ride the storm. And then I physically went from that point there to the point of where I couldn't get out of my bed. My energy felt really fatigued. So I thought I better call the doctor now. It'd been like 1 or 2 days. The doctor came round. I explained to him, you know, my stomach's feeling very elevated. And bearing in mind, at the time, I was quite a low body fat percentage, so I could normally see my abdominals, like muscles, and they were gone. It was like bloated. And I was like, it's very odd. I can't put my finger on what it is. He sort of said, you've got gastroenteritis. Now, gastroenteritis is a stomach bug.
Yep.
It's you know, it comes and goes. You can take some sort of probiotics, it will go. I sort of, you know, you listen to your doctors, you entrust in them, you think, you know, they're going to know what they're talking about. It's their job. Another 2 days passed, and in this time I was puking up maybe 3 or 4 small buckets of bile, just pure bile. Wow. And I wasn't eating anything. So I called the GP again, the same again. They said, you know, drink squash, blah, blah, blah. Done the same again. I called the doctors a 3rd time. They came round. At this point now, I was a bit like, I was getting quite concerned because I lost about 1 stone. The doctor dismissed me again. So my dad came down from London. So my dad lives in London. He came down to visit me, and he took one look at me. He said, get in the car now. So obviously I must have looked extremely ill from the way he perceived me to the way the doctors perceived me. And when you're in that ill state, because I was sort of, you know, my electrolytes and everything was so low, I was completely depleted. I wasn't eating anything. So I was very, very like fatigued.
Yeah.
So I remember sort of crawling to the car almost. And then we went to the hospital. I remember walking into Southampton General Hospital, and you know, they have the little screens where you get information from, the little information booth.
Yeah.
I remember putting my hand on there. I remember it clear as day. I put my hand on the desk and I went to say, where's like where's the emergency unit? And I remember I collapsed. So I fell to my side. I knocked my tooth clean out on the side here. And then I woke up to someone putting a catheter in, which, as you can imagine, was a bit of a shock.
Yeah.
I was like, what's going on?
And your dad's there at this point, right?
No, my dad wasn't there then. So,
right.
You know, I would have been carted in. So basically I was in the surgical unit. So the guy said to me, you're going into theatre, you're going into surgery. And I was like, whoa, I had no idea what was going on here. And then that was it, lights out. I basically was in an induced coma for about 2 weeks. And that time, basically what they had to do is they opened my abdomen up via a 9-inch incision, and they left me open. So it's called a vac. And basically what that is where they leave your abdominal wall open, and every day over the course of that sort of week and a half, 2 weeks, they would cart me down to theatre, take all my guts out, wash them, and then vacuum pack them back in. Wow. So basically I was completely out of it. My family and stuff were around me, but I was completely out of it.
That's crazy. So they actually take it out of your body, clean it all up, pop it all back in again.
Yeah, and then they leave you like that. So it looks like you're almost, if you were to come and see me when I was in theatre, it would look like I was pregnant, because they don't actually put it back in. You know, like in America, where they vacuum seal clothing.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that.
Oh, they do it in the UK as well.
Yeah, they do it. What do you do it, do you, Phil?
Yeah, no, we vacuum seal clothes.
Yeah.
Maybe we get them from America. I don't know.
Yeah, that's it. So basically, that's what they had to do to me every day.
Wow.
And at that point, I was given a 20% chance of survival. So my odds of survival were obviously quite low.
And obviously, at this point, are you conscious at any stage of this? None of this. So you're not aware of any of this at all. So they're telling your family and saying, look, odds are 20%.
Yes, yeah. And obviously that's very worrying for my mum. A lot of stress for my family.
I can imagine.
You know, they don't, we've never been in a situation, none of our family have been in a situation like this. So all of a sudden, you know, me in my early 20s could not be here anymore. Like the stress that must have caused my mum. She had to stay in Southampton for 2 weeks. Yes, it's absolutely horrible. And basically, you know, I had to fight it to me, load of medication. It was quite a drawn process, but I did wake up, thankfully. I woke up and my mum told the doctors, do not wake Mesha up unless I'm here, because she knew I would freak out. Like, bearing in mind now, Phil, I went in being like 12 and a half stone. I was about to wake up being like nearly 5 stone. So the weight difference.
And how tall are you?
I'm 5'8", so I basically look like a twiglet. Right. You know, it was a bad way, and I remember again, it's very strange when you're in these. I had very vivid dreams when I was under, you know, in that coma, and I also remember waking up, and I remember holding my arm up and looking at my arm, and it was about, you know, yay thin at the top because all the muscle mass had been eaten away, and yeah, that was a really scary time. But the team at the hospital were incredible. I was up on my feet after all of that. I had a massive abdominal scar. I was very, very thin. I was up on my feet 2 days after. I had my arm over 2 doctors, and I was marching on the spot.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
so at this point, when you've woken up, everything's been stitched back together.
Yes.
Whatever they were doing to your gut was kind of done. So they treated it. They'd done whatever they needed to do. So at this point now, you know, you're 5 stone. You probably, you know, there'll be atrophy everywhere, right? There's potentially even a little bit of neural shutdown, I would imagine, as well, because you've been lying in a bed, right, for a while. So you've got to almost learn to walk to some degree, alongside learning to, you know, function in and around, you know, obviously probably a lot of pain, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
So essentially, we got to think about your abdomen does. You don't realise until you've had it sliced in half. It does like 90% of the
Yeah,
work.
like everything, right? Every
Everything.
movement.
Yeah. So I was led flat on my bed. I didn't eat for about a month, so I was fed via a PICC line in my neck.
Yeah.
I had to learn to walk again, so I had physios moving my legs because there was no muscle mass there, completely gone, and I was holding no fat, and I could pretty much, when I looked down, I could see inside my abdominal cavity. And one of the things that really stands out to me was, I remember a nurse coming to me and saying, like, Mesha, you've had this done, but some people don't think before they speak. And one of the things she said is, you're never going to have a six-pack like Peter Andre again. And I remember thinking, why on earth would you say something like that?
Good bed manner.
Yeah. I had a better six-pack than Peter Andre, for God's sake.
I was like, how dare you compare me to him?
But no, it was a lot to come to terms with. My mindset then, I was broken. Like I was
right. So at that
broken.
point, you were like, "Oh my God, this is like a big. I've got a hill to climb here."
I had in my mind that I was going back to university in a week.
Yeah.
I literally had in my mind, my head of department, the head of faculty came to visit me, and I was like, "Yes, I'll be back in a couple of weeks." And he must have been looking at me thinking, "You're not going anywhere anytime soon." And that was a really bitter one to swallow, because I knew that all my friends were going to graduate before me. I knew that,
and you were in your third year here, right?
Yeah, I was in my final year.
year.
So all my friends were graduating. I was going to be the one that was stuck at home recovering. And all those little things really played on my mind at the beginning. I thought, at one point at that stage when I would look at myself, because I remember I went and stood in the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I thought, like, I'd rather not be here than look like this. It was because, it was from a body perspective and the way I looked, I was like, it felt like I was a little boy again. And that was really, really tough. That was really tough time for me. But that I learned a lot from there. Like straight away for me, like I said earlier, after I had a little sulk, I felt sorry for myself, all the natural things that you do, and you probably warrant it as well. I very quickly shifted to, okay, this is my situation now. Only I can get myself out of this.
Right. And how long after this? So give me a timeline here so people can understand where the timeline is.
This shift happened after maybe a week after waking up.
Wow. So literally you've come to terms. So you've come to terms with all of this in a week. You've had your little sulk, as you put it, which I think was more than warranted. So you've had your little sulk, and you're telling me a week later. Now, just to kind of put this into context, 7 days later, you think there's a mindset shift there, or there is a mindset shift, and you've gone, right, this is how life is, got to deal with it, get on with it.
Yeah, I kind of thought like, one thing that I've always said from the beginning, for me, exercise has actually taught me a lot. And what I mean by that is taught me to be out of my comfort zone. I don't think a lot of people ever go out of their comfort zone. And what I mean by that is, when you go to do something what you're really uncomfortable with, and you get that deep, like sickening feeling in your stomach, where your stomach twists. I don't think people, I taught some of my clients, and they explain that as they've got anxiety. They're anxious, they're, this kind of thing. And I'm like, that's not anxiety, that's going out of your comfort zone. And I feel like what I learned from exercise, when I pushed my body and I pushed my limitations, that helped me get through the initial pain of both of my surgeries. Like we'll talk about my other surgery shortly, but that pain and discomfort and going well out of like my comfort zone and being really, really pushed to my limitations, I managed to handle that stress through exercise. Like I put it down to that massively, for me anyway, on a personal level. And like you said earlier, that shift of mindset in the early stage, that definitely happened after 7 days, purely on the basis of, I thought, one of the conversations I had with a doctor was, he said, you're going to be in hospital for 6 months. So, I was like, I was looking around thinking, this is my reality for 6 months right now. Like, I'm not going anywhere. Like, there's nothing I can do. And I was in my own room as well. I was on my own. And I thought, I don't want to be here for 6 months. And the only way you recover in hospital quicker, normally for most cases, is if you get moving and if you eat more And I knew from my degree that, you know, if I feed my body properly, I'm only going to recover faster. And that went from being in hospital for 6 months to under a month I got out.
Wow.
I was leaving that hospital. And, you know, that was because I'd done all the little things at the beginning. I didn't overdo it. I didn't over push myself. But, you know, when the doctor said, right, you need to get out of that bed, sitting in that side chair for, you know, at least 15 minutes in the morning, in the afternoon and in the evening. And as much as I didn't want to do it, I got myself out of that bed, which felt like I ran a marathon, and I'd sit in that chair. And then the couple of days after, I walked to the door and back with my mum holding me. And then I walked to the end of the corridor, and I just constantly try and push myself a little bit. And those little things for me, like they come from, they're in the mind. You can do it. You just got to tell yourself you can do it.
And I think, I totally agree with you with the exercise thing. I think that carries over into so many aspects of life. It's something that we talk about, you know, we have this thing about movement. You know, we actively encourage people to move in whatever, you know, iteration that comes, because that challenges you, whether it's being out of breath, whether it's, you know, build up a lactic acid, you know, whatever it might be. It takes that little bit of comfort that you had, which is so easy just to sit back into, right? It's so easy just to go, well, you know, it's just easier if I don't do anything, or it's just easier if I don't try and push this. And it's much easier. And again, you know, you hit the nail on the head where you're like, look, I was sat in bed and I had to get out of bed, which was this massive challenge. And then I had to sit in this chair, which again was a massive challenge. But the fact is I did it. You know, there was action, there was intent to do that. And, you know, you had to be disciplined about it to be able to come to that end goal, which the end goal at that point was, by the sound of it, from, you know, your initial reaction was, I want to get out of this place as quick as possible. Mm-hmm. And ultimately you've got the experts there telling you that it's going to be 6 months, but maybe they're erring on the side of caution, aren't they, with people, and saying, well, most people don't do what we tell them, and most people don't follow through. And this is, you know, my experience with physiotherapists, you know, is that the vast majority of time as to why people don't recover faster is because they don't do what they're told. You know, because physiotherapy is essentially what you were doing, right? Is that they were telling you a series of things that you needed to do that made you feel uncomfortable. And physiotherapy is a lot like that. It's, you know, it's a lot of movements, a lot of small movements that, even to some degree, it's boring. You know, you have to do these movements, you know, 100 times a day or whatever it might be, but people just don't do it. And then they complain, you know, months and months later as to why they're still stuck where they were before. And again, there was that drive from your perspective of, I want to get out of here as quick as possible, you know, and, you know, be it 6 months, that's a worst case scenario in my head, but I'm going to make it shorter. But to make it a month is incredible, right? Is that after a month? So you've got this month, doctors, nurses probably going, no, this ain't right? Is that the response you got? Were they all like, this shouldn't happen?
It was incredible. I got along with the nursing and staff really, really well. And I would go above and beyond to try and help them as well, you know, because there was people in there. When you're in the medical industry, you have to, in order to pass certain segments of your doctorate, you have to complete certain things. So I was like you're like a case study when you're in hospital, because, you know, someone, for instance, came over and said, right, can I take out your PICC line in your neck? And she was a junior doctor. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. they don't get the opportunity to do that again. And as much as it was horrible, because there was like a blue thing about this big but went straight into my heart through my neck, I was like, it made me feel good, because I was like, I've helped this person. And those little ticking those little boxes when you've got nothing to do, it gives you a buzz. And one of the doctors always used to come up to me and he goes, he'd repeat it. And I was thinking in my mind, what is this person going on about all the time? He'd always say to me, he'd say, make sure you stay positive, because it will get you out of here faster. And I was always a bit like, at the time, I was a bit like, okay, yeah, I kind of get what you're saying, but what does it actually mean?
Yeah, and it just sounds a bit wet, doesn't it? It sounds a bit kind of, oh yeah, whatever. It's a bit like, you know, a motivational meme on social media, right? People read it and go, yeah, nice sentiment.
Yeah, but it's got value. It's got value because, you know, those endorphins what you release when you're more positive, and the way you view things and everything, it completely changes your recovery from my position, you know, the way I've been. And, you know, that shift of from that first surgery to the second, again, took a whole nother another turn for me. So I had that first surgery. I recovered within that period. I left hospital. I went home, and that was an amazing feeling. When you get to go home, it was incredible.
And home was back to your parents, yeah?
Yeah. It felt like a little bit of a back step for me, because I was living on my own. I was independent.
Yeah,
that. My mum loved it. A little boy was back.
Little boy was back, and it's probably making you meals and that caring aspect that parents love.
Yeah, it was. And to be honest, I was a little bit, throughout those times in the early stage, I was a little bit resentful because I was blaming the doctors for not diagnosing me. Because that first surgery, although we've only just covered this up to this point, the reason why I had all that surgery and what actually happened was the most simplistic thing of a burst appendix. That's all it was.
Wow.
So that is the most common procedure that the NHS basically do on a yearly basis on the abdomen.
You know something? I was actually talking to someone about this not so long ago. I don't think it was you. We had a chat a week or two ago, and I don't think it was you we were talking about. But I always remember at school, burst appendix were like a common thing.
Yes.
It was like, oh, such and such is having their appendix out. Such and such is having their appendix out. And it was like loads of people. Now, I don't know whether it's because I'm an adult now, but I don't seem to hear it very often where somebody's like, oh, somebody's had to go in and get, and normally I would hear it from my friends who've got kids who've, and you don't hear of it very much now. So is it something, again, you might not be able to answer this, but is it something that's less common?
Yeah, I think it happens more frequently in younger ages.
Yeah.
It's more frequent, like the of that happening, the inflammation within that area. But I basically was quite bitter for a period of time when I got home because it was such a simplistic thing. And when I looked online, all the symptoms that I was saying to the doctors were what was on the NHS website. So I was almost like, you didn't diagnose me, and then now I'm on my arse in bed, like fighting for my life. Like, that isn't fair. And, I actually tried to pursue that, but it didn't go anywhere.
Pursue it in what respect?
Legally, legally, because I had 3 GPs visit me and no action taken. And I was like, that isn't right. Like, that's not fair. 3 separate GPs and not being able to diagnose me with the most simplistic of conditions.
Let's get back onto that later. And let's, obviously it's slightly less interesting, but let's get onto that later as to how that transpired and how you got over that kind of resentful feeling towards those GPs and was it a mistake? Wasn't it a mistake? And how that all sort of panned out. But continue with it. So at this point, you've had that initial surgery. You're back home with your parents. You're getting home cooked meals, I assume, and you're just trying to build your strength back up again and get back to Mesha, right? And trying to get that 6-pack back, right?
Yeah. I was in that phase of like a weird bubble of my own little world because I was just playing Xbox, playing Netflix, like watching Netflix, doing nothing. And then I was at the stage where I started to feel strong again. So, at the early phases, I was just sort of loitering around the house, being really careful, having baths, because obviously I had a massive bit of scar tissue to look after as well. I didn't want to get like a radiation or a prolapse. I was really worried about that. And then it got to the point where I felt well enough to go back to the gym. So I thought, I'm going to go back to the gym, just do purely resistance work, as in like on machines, and just get my body moving again.
And again, timeline on this? So how long after? So I'm assuming, have they stapled? Have they stitched? What have they done here?
This initially was stitched, and it was left quite open because I didn't have much body fat. They really struggled to close it back up. Right. So I had to have a couple of infusions because it dried out a little bit because it was open for so long. So it was very angry looking. It was horrible. It was very I didn't like looking at it, to be honest. But I went back into the gym and I got myself up to a good weight again. I was at like 10.5 stone and I was really healthy. And then I started to feel ill again. And this is where my next surgery came into account.
Okay. So feeling ill, you said started feeling ill. How did that transpire? What was that feeling?
So I started going to the toilet a lot. I started going to the toilet started 3 to 4 times a day. And when I say going to the toilet, I was going for stools. So I was basically going for a lot of poos. In short, and basically I was going maybe 2 to 3 times a day and it was getting looser and looser, and then it went from being that many times a day to maybe 40 to 50 times a day, and I was losing loads of blood.
Wow.
And I, in my mind at first, thought cancer. I thought I had maybe some sort of cancer.
Yep.
Where my mind was drawn to after that
And
was
was that self-inflicted to some degree because you there googling and
always remember on the buses it said if you're losing blood from your back passage, cancer.
Right, because there was that big campaign, wasn't there, about it? And
exactly.
Yeah.
So I was really worried because I was like, oh my god, have I got cancer? I was panicking and I didn't know what to do. I didn't tell my mum at the beginning because I thought I've already been through all this. I don't want to. This is something else again.
So you didn't tell your mum because you were worried it was cancer, or you didn't tell your mum because it was quite a personal thing? Because this is, again, something that we've talked about off camera, was it, because you talk about these things, and because we're talking about things that a lot of people don't talk about, right? But you talk about them like they just kind of flow, and you just talk about them. It's normal for you to talk about them. So was that, at the time, was that because it was something you didn't want to talk about with your mum, or was it because you were fearful it was cancer?
I think it was a combination of both, to be honest. It was a little bit of like, I didn't want to make my mum worry more than what she already has. She's been through enough. And I was just embarrassed. It was really embarrassing. I was like, do you know what I mean? I don't want to talk to my mum about going to the toilet this much. I don't want to talk to anyone about it.
And I think that to me is that's a massive thing there that you've just deliberately sort of said, and is that so many people with conditions and with even detecting things that end up being cancer, is that they're scared or they're embarrassed or whatever it might be. So they don't step forward and they don't address it and they don't talk to anyone about it and they don't discuss it because it becomes something personal. So they're like, oh, I've got this down here or whatever it might be. And they leave it. And then inherently it gets worse and worse and worse, right?
It progresses. And that's so important that you do try and approach those issues sooner than later, because the doctors aren't against you, they're there to help you, but people perceive it as like they're gonna give me medication, or they're gonna do this, or they're gonna give me surgery, but it's actually a helping thing. So it started off with that 40 to 50 times a day, which was crazy, but I also started to get different side effects, and that's when I was like, okay, that's enough now, like I need to do something about it. I was getting chronic fatigue, so my anemia for the average male, I think it sits around 13, whereas for me it dropped down to about 1.5. So when I went and got a blood test, they were like,
your iron levels, right?
Yeah, they were like, I don't know how you're standing right now, and that is the way I felt, and it was horrendous. So a lot of tests happened over the course of 8 months. So it took me 8 months to get a diagnosis, and I ended up getting a colonoscopy, which is a camera basically up your behind, and then they take a biopsy, and then they test that biopsy, and then they can give you a diagnosis.
Yep.
And what had happened, because I had so much inflammation in my abdominal cavity from that first burst appendix, it had produced inflammation within my gut. And that inflammation had been getting worse over the course of weeks and months. And then I ended up getting diagnosed with IBD. So IBD can be categorized into 2 conditions. You've got Crohn's disease, and then you've got ulcerative colitis. Now, I'll just do a clear...
So IBD, for the people that don't know, IBD is irritable bowel disease?
Disease, that's correct. So, some people get confused with, it's not IBS, they're completely different. They're managed very differently, and the severity levels of them are completely different as well. But IBD is categorized into 2 conditions. I've got ulcerative colitis. Now, ulcerative colitis just affects the large colon. So if anyone doesn't know what that looks like, when you think of the diagram, you've got your wiggly guts in the middle, and then you've got the ones that go around the outside that connect to the anus. My one affects the whole large one, so the one that goes around the outside and connects to the anus. For people that have got Crohn's disease, it affects the whole digestive system. So anywhere from mouth to anus can be affected. And what the effect is, it's basically like small bleeding ulcers. And obviously, if you've got something like Crohn's disease, it affects your absorption of food. So your weight can drop massively and you can't actually take nutrients in. Whereas if you've got ulcerative colitis, the large colon has a few different roles, but what it mainly does is spindle your stool, regulate your salt levels and your hydration as well. So mine was affected in there, and I had to take basically medication. That's what they gave me. I had my diagnosis. They said, you're going to have to take these 16 tablets every day. And I was like, what? They gave me steroids, a lot of autoimmune drugs. And I went from being like, rewind back a couple of years from being in the best shape in my life to someone who I felt like I was in my 70s, and I was taking 16 tablets a day in order to survive.
And at this point, you just kind of started to get back to normality, right?
Yeah, I just started to feel like I can get my life back on now. I can go back and get my degree. And when I was taking these medications, and I went through a series of maybe 8, 9, 10 different medication trials over the course of 4 years. And I was taking these medications, and unfortunately for me, because my bowel disease was so aggressive, it wasn't really touching the sides. It was just sort of like, it was maybe bringing me to about 30% health, which, isn't great. I was like, I can't live like this. I couldn't go on holiday. I went on holiday once and my airways closed, which was horrendous. I couldn't breathe. I had to go to hospital and have steroids in my throat to bring my airways down. My limbs would swell up like 4 times the size. The white point in my eye was always bled out as if I had just had a hemorrhage. They were always bled out. So people would stare at me all the time. I was really ill still. And I was pretty much bedbound for that whole time I was on medication. And then, that transpired for a period of time. And with these conditions, you have to find the right medication.
Yeah.
So I ended up finding a drug which is called infliximab, which is basically derived from like rat matter. That's how they make it. That's how it's developed, which I was like, because I would always research the medications I was taking, because I was like, they're going in my body. And I had that, and it gave me my life back for a year. It was incredible. I had the first solid poo I had in 4 years, and I would look down the toilet and be like, oh my God.
Almost
yes.
like an air of pride about it. You're like, yes.
There was.
And again, that I think that puts context into a lot of things, right? Is because, all of a sudden you're going, I'm thankful for having a solid poo.
Yeah.
Which is, it's bizarre, is that, and then you've got kind of what people categorize as first world problems, right? You're looking and going, oh my God, my Xbox won't load today. And then you're there going, I'm really pleased I had a solid poo today.
Yeah. It really is that. It's the simplistic things where I was like so grateful. And what that allowed me to do is to go back to university. So the minute my health felt better, I contacted my course leader, and I was like, I'm going back to university this year. And because
you had 1 year left, right? Or were you 1 year left? And were you part way through that year, or?
No, I had to start again.
You had to start that whole year again. Okay.
Yeah. I had to start again.
I guess would be a bit of, a kind of tricky one, right? Because in some ways you're like, I get another year at uni. Yeah. And then in other respects, you're kind of like, yeah, but I've got to do all that stuff again, right?
To be honest, Phil, I was just happy to be alive and be able to live like a normal person. Yeah. All I've ever wanted to do from the minute I was unwell was go to work, wake up in the morning and not feel horrendous, be able to like go and do normal things, exercise. It really is when everything is stripped away from you, the basic necessities, you realize how lucky you are and how fortunate you are to have them.
So do you think, and again, I'm sure we'll get into this in a bit more detail, but do you think you're a way more grateful person than you were before?
100%.
So you're grateful for little things in life. You're grateful for, again, you said there, waking up, being able to go to work, being able to, and again, even potentially things that you don't really enjoy doing, just the fact that you've got the opportunity to do them, right?
Yeah, definitely. And the fact of, when you're stripped of everything, completely, you come to realize how important it is for me. Like, I was like, it's so important now that I look after my body. I only get one, and I want to like optimize it as much as possible. I don't want to be back in this situation again. I get a lot of clientele that they come to me when they've already got a bad back, like they've got a horrendously bad back. And I'm like, you need to manage this before it's happened, and that's one thing I've learned now through my health is I always try and do all the things that are going to keep me as well as possible. Yeah. Just so I never get into the situation where I am unwell.
Almost like future-proofing your body, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You want to wake up every day and go, right, what can I do today to make sure that tomorrow happens, and tomorrow is better, and tomorrow is and whether we're talking about business, whether we're talking about physiques, whether we're talking whatever we're talking about, right? It's that same ethos. It's that whole I want to do everything I can to optimize what I've got and the opportunity that sits in front of me, right?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, that went really well. That, you know, going back to that point of where I had that year of really good health, my mind was, everything was positive. There was not one morning where I woke up and didn't smile. I was literally like, yes.
So I'm gonna throw a little thing that I used to do with people I used to deal with.
Yeah.
So you said you had a year of really good health.
Yeah.
Right. If you were to compare that to prior to being diagnosed by being ill, what would you grade that? So if you said a day for you, a 10 out of 10 day for you previously, where would that sit at this point? So when you're saying I had a year of really good health, is that really good health in comparison to where you were when you were ill? Or is it really good health in respect to where you were before?
Comparison to where, to, you know, I would say I'll probably, to the normal person, I was maybe a 6 out of 10.
Right.
So it was good for me, you know. I'd been feeling maybe a 3 out of 10 or a 2 out of 10 for a long time. When you've been ill for a number of years, you forget what it's like to be healthy. So I couldn't even compare myself now to myself before having all of the surgeries. Can't remember. Those days are gone. I can't remember looking down at my body and not having a 9-inch incision on my stomach. It's just a really vague memory. So I would say at that stage I was about a 6 or a 7 out of 10 in terms of my health on a daily basis. And, you know, I was just happy to be able to go and do normal things. But unfortunately, with a lot of these autoimmune medications, that is short-lived. And my body basically built up antibodies. So I started, you know, I remember that first day when I did look down the toilet again and I had mucus down there and there was blood, and I thought, oh my God. Yeah. It was that really deep sinking feeling, and the anxiety of it all came back again.
Kind of, here we go again, right?
Yeah, here we go again. It's like, how many times have I got to dig myself out of this situation? And unfortunately, again, my weight dropped massively. So I went down to, like, you know, that sort of 6 stone mark again, and everything was drawn out of me. And I had a really good relationship with my consultant. And I went and had my final meeting with him. And I was like, listen, doc, I don't want to be taking these medications for the rest of my life. I already exhausted most of the medications. So what I would have had to be doing is taking trial drugs. And trial drugs, you know, they've not been tested as in long term. And the side effects can be like cancer. You know, you can lose limbs. You can get blood conditions.
Yeah,
you can get diabetes.
It's almost like a chance, right? You've got
you're chancing it. And,
experimental.
You know, although like you kind of got a choice, at the same time you haven't got a choice. And I sat down with my doctor, and always a last resort for doctors is surgery. It's always a last resort. And one of the things that I'm quite a big advocate of is trying to not view that as a last resort. It's just another option. And basically what I had to make the decision, and what I had to discuss with my doctor, is to have what's known as a total colectomy. Now, a total colectomy is essentially where they remove the whole large colon. So they basically, I'd go into theatre again, I'd have an open incision, they would take my whole large gut out, and then they would leave me with what's called a stoma. And a stoma is basically the end of my ileum, so the end of my small intestine. And they basically push it out of my abdominal wall, and that is my new bumhole. That's how I go to the toilet now. So I now call my bumhole my third armpit. It doesn't really do much, it's just sort of there. And, you know, now effectively all my waste, so all my number 2s, they come out of my abdominal wall. And obviously that's a massive life-changing surgery for anyone to have.
And is that, and again, just for people listening, is that a controllable thing? Which, like, obviously, you know, when you go to the toilet, is that a controllable thing, or is that just something that happens as it happens?
No, so my stomas, it functions sort of all day, every day. So we could be talking right now, I could be pooing as we talk.
Okay.
You know, so it sort of functions all day, every day. You know, there'll be times in the day where it's more active. It just depends when you eat, what you eat, you know, how much liquid you consume. These are the things that affect your digestive system. I've become very in tune with my digestive system and the way it works. So I know, like, for instance, now if I'm doing a podcast for a few hours, I make sure that I eat at a certain time last night, so it's not massively active today. You know, there's ways around it, and it's you become your own expert within your condition over the years. So I had that conversation with my doctor, which is obviously a massive jump for me. But people always feel sorry for me. Like, you know, when I say I've got a bag, and a lot of people are like, oh my God, I'm so sorry that you're having to go through that, because there's a huge association with this condition being for old people. But when you've been as ill as I've been, for as long as I've been, having this bag is literally like a blessing. It is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I can now live completely normal. And, you know, the doctors are always skeptical with, you know, for everyone, that's not the case. You will have some people that, you know, any surgery comes with complications. But I went into that room and sat with that doctor, and I discussed with how I was feeling. He stood up, he walked across the corridor, he got the surgeons from across the corridor. He come in, he looked at me, he said, I'll do you in my overtime on Saturday. And I was like, whoa. So he said, if you don't get it done on Saturday, unfortunately, you're going to be like at the back of the list. So you'll be behind cancer patients. And I was like, okay, I obviously completely understand, because theirs is life-threatening. Yeah. But I was like, you know what, I just want to get it done. So I booked in. I had that surgery a week later. And I woke up feeling like straight away I felt better. It's really hard to explain. I just woke up feeling like my body had gotten rid of a diseased organ, and it could just immediately function better.
And at this point, obviously, the volume in your stomach is significantly less, right?
Yeah, I always thought that. I said, it was one of the questions I asked before surgery. Obviously, you're taking something out. It's 6 foot long. It's 6 foot organ. You know, is there going to be? Am I going to feel like when I move around that I slosh around? And he was like, no. Your other organs, because your small intestine and stuff, they are quite big. They just fall into place. They naturally fall and fill up the cavity, because it's obviously very compressed in there. But he goes, yeah, you won't have any problems like that. It will just fall into place, which is, you know, a very weird. When I think about it, it's a weird process. But
weird, but pretty incredible, right?
I was thinking, it just shows how amazing the body is.
Yeah.
You know,
unreal, right?
How can I function with a 6 foot organ not in my body? You know, amazing.
Did you keep it?
No, but I did.
Did they give you the option?
No, they actually didn't.
Because they often do this, don't they? When you get something removed, people are like, "Do you want to keep it?" I'm like, I was anticipating there that you had like some kind of a, you know, like a medical jar behind you with it curled up inside of it.
I wish I had it. I would love to.
Right. So you actually do wish you kept it, right? That's mad.
Oh yeah. How cool would that be?
Yeah. There's my
There's my guts. There's my guts.
That's mad.
Again,
again, I read something just the other day, which is truly reflective of what you're telling me here. Is that this was about parents. So I read this piece about this parent whose you know, son had a disability, and he said, you know, he was explaining it all, and he said, look, he goes, it's not a disability, it's just a different way of having the same outcome. He said, you know, the way that he learns and the way that he does things is just different to how other people do it. He said it's only categorized as a disability because it isn't a normal thing that most people are doing, right? And it seems to me that you've got this perspective where you're like, right, hold on, I just do this differently to you. That's all. My life that circumnavigates all of that is exactly the same. You know, and you said I can live a normal life. I'm sure there's a lot of listeners who are probably going, you know, how does that happen? And for you, I mean, how does it hinder you? Does it hinder you? Does it, you know, what does that entail for you on a day-to-day basis that's different to what it was before and more challenging than it was before, I guess is my question.
Yeah, you know, like you said, it's just a different, you know, I always say to people, a bag isn't the answer for everyone. Some people will have a bag and it'll be very problematic and it will cause them a lot of problems. But for me, like I said earlier, it has changed my life, and it is just changing one system for another. So what I do now, like if we were to both go to the toilet at the same time, I guarantee that we'd come out at the same time. I can micromanage it, and I have become an expert in it, and I know I can change my bag in 30 seconds if I needed to. I could change it in an hour when I do a Facebook Live to show people what I do behind the scenes. Yeah. You know, it's just like you said, it's different. And it is weird. It's when I first got my stoma, I remember It's
weird to you?
It was at the beginning very weird. It was bizarre because I'd never met anyone before who had a stoma.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of the reasons why I do a lot of the things I do online. because I want to desensitize and to take away the stigma around my condition and show people what's behind it, because I was basically going to have a condition, and when you're in hospital, what they do before you have a stoma surgery, they show you a prosthetic stoma, and then you put it on your stomach, and then they draw an X on your stomach, and that is where your stoma is going to go. So basically, where your genes fit and whatnot, you can pick the best placement for you. Yeah, so there's methods of madness.
Yeah.
So I had this X on my stomach.
And tell me you got it right, right?
Yeah, I got it right.
You got it where you wanted it.
I could wear my jeans and stuff, and it's comfortable. But you know, you're waking up to a very juicy bit of gut hanging out your stomach, and it's when you first come out of surgery, the guts don't like to be touched, so they lay dormant for like a suspended period of time, and they don't function properly. It's like basically paralysis of your gut wall for like a certain period of time. Everyone's different. Mine was for about 2 weeks. So I was very ill for about 2 weeks after my surgery, and my body was completely depleted because it just wasn't absorbing, it wasn't working. And then it started to function again. And when it started to function again, the output was like water, and it was crazy. It was coming out and filling up like a bag. I had like a big bag next to my bed, and it was like probably maybe a couple of liters. It was filling that up every few hours. So I was like just completely drained of nutrients in my body. And obviously that was causing my bag to leak. The leaking was all going in my scar. It was very messy.
Yeah.
I couldn't really move because I had an epidural. So, you know, a spinal injection to make my whole abdomen numb. And that was really hard to get used to at the beginning. I was thinking, is this the way it's going to be the whole time?
Yeah, is this it, right?
I was like, have I made a mistake here? Because what am I going to do about this? This is maybe just as bad as before. But after I left, you know, hospital, and I got back on my feet, and I started to do my normal day at home and change it myself and whatnot, and then my diet got better, it started to like solidate. So for anyone who doesn't know, your stoma produces there's different types of stomas. So the different types of stomas are just totally dependent on where it comes out of the abdomen. So mine's at the end of my ileum, so it's known as an ileostomy stoma.
Okay.
Some people will have the most common one, what you might have heard of, Phil, as well, is a colostomy.
Yep.
People have a colostomy bag. That's a more formed stool. So the stool's, it comes out looking like a normal stool, but out of your stomach, which is quite bizarre. Whereas mine is like a porridgey consistency. That's the best way. I hope no one's having their breakfast now. But it's more of a porridgey consistency. So those type of things and the way your output will change depending on the way you eat. The amount of liquid you consume, they all change. They basically make your output completely different.
Wow. And so management. So let's talk about, you know, management and you know, how do you manage this on a day-to-day basis? How does it affect your day? So let's go through a day of you know, a day with Mesha, right? So you wake up in the morning, you know, what happens?
So I start my day I start work normally about 5 a.m. So I'm an early riser. I have my first clients at about 5 a.m. normally. So I normally wake up at about 4, and my bag tends to be full. So, you know, I've been in a series of cases, and I've got a few funny stories where my bag exploded in the night and caused absolute havoc, because obviously you've got to change the bed sheets.
Wow.
There's poo everywhere. It's not ideal. I remember one story actually where I've got to tell this one because it's a funny one. We were at my dad's house, and we had a Five Guys. I love a Five Guys. We've not got one in Weymouth. But obviously if I eat something like that, it's high in saturated fats. It goes through me quite quickly. Yeah. I was at my dad's house. My bag went, and it went all over my girlfriend's leg. And bear in mind,
I'm assuming by you mean went. Did it burst, or is it popped off, or is it?
There's a seal I could show you on here. So there's a seal on the edge point here.
Yep.
And this seal, and behind the bag, I think it would be easy if I just show you as well, Phil. I can show you from here. So the bags, they look like this.
Right.
So what they look like. Now my stoma goes into that hole. So it falls into the hole. So that's
those of you that are just listening to this, he's just showing me what a bag looks like.
It's basically like a base plate.
That
sticks to the skin.
Okay.
Now that base plate, sometimes your stool, if it's too thick or if you've eaten something too grainy, it will work its way under that base plate,
Yep.
and then slowly will
Lift it
out and cause a leak, and then the stool, what you've got there, if it's still producing, will end up going everywhere.
Right.
And I remember that happened when I was at my dad's house the first time. And I remember I woke up, and I'm a bit of a joker. I find if you joke about your condition, it can make it easier and whatnot. It's a coping mechanism as well. Yeah. And I looked over at my girlfriend, I turned the light on, I was like, my bag's gone. And we looked at each other, and I went, oh my God, you've got a bit of poo on your head, on her forehead. She didn't. Yeah. And then she looked at me and said, oh my God, you actually have. And I did have a bit of poo on my forehead. Yeah, just crazy. But, my day starts really early. I'll empty my bag on a normal basis. Like, the leaks rarely happen. If they do, it's just one of those things for me. I'll empty my bag, and then normally throughout the day, I'd only have to empty my bag maybe 3 to 4 times max.
Okay.
My output's quite slow. Some people will empty it 10 to 15 times a day, but it depends on how much of your digestive system you've had removed. Because obviously, if you've got less,
is that diet dependent as well? So obviously, I'm anticipating here, and again, I'm making a judgment here that I would anticipate that your diet's pretty good, right?
Yeah, I have a good diet. For people that are in the early stages of living with a stoma, it's quite hard to come to terms with what's healthy and what's not healthy for someone living with stoma. So at the beginning, a loaf of bread would be more healthy and more beneficial for someone than having a salad. That's quite difficult to come to terms with, because what you're having to understand is the way the body digests and ingests food.
Yep.
And what comes out of my stoma is almost quite whole. So if I ate a massive handful of cashew nuts, that could actually block my output. And I have to go to hospital because of that. Yeah. So, you do have to be careful in the types of foods that you're actually eating in terms of your health.
I'm assuming you have to chew your food, right?
Yeah, I use the 20 chew rule. So when I introduce a new food, I'll chew it to it's like almost a pulp, like it's nothing, it's totally gone down, and then I'll swallow it. Because otherwise, you can come into a world of problems.
And I'm assuming very disciplined about that, right?
Yeah, I have to be because, the last thing I want is to get a block, because I've had one block in my time, and it's because I was given Colectomy.
Right.
Because this would be an example story that explains it really well. I used to drink 3 to 4 litres a day of water. When I had my stoma fitted, I'd done the same thing and didn't get told otherwise. And what happened actually crystallized my kidneys. And then I ended up getting like mild kidney stones, like small crystallization. Wow. And my back was in agonizing pain. So I went to the doctors, they gave me Colectomy, and the Colectomy actually blocked and gave me constipation. So my stoma was bleeding and I couldn't actually produce output. Wow. And that is so uncomfortable. So because of that situation, now I make sure that I really monitor what I'm eating, what I'm putting in my body. And I actually use a Monday to Sunday diary, and I write down all my foods. And if I eat something and it creates loads of gas, or it creates like my stool to be too thick, I've pinpointed it then within the day. So I think that's a really good thing to do if you're living with a medical condition, which is digestive based, is track all your nutrients.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people because I've seen over the years, I've seen people with conditions where they know what the advice is and they know how to manage them. They just choose not to. It's almost like it's a self-sabotage thing where they go, right, I'm not meant to do this, but I'm going to do it anyways. Almost like a rebellious thing where they're like, I've been told I'm not to eat this, but I'm going to anyways.
Yes, you find that a lot with like diabetes and stuff.
Yeah.
We'll do it anyway. It's really interesting. One of my really good friends had the same condition as me, and we were managing. And he used to say to me all the time, "You let your condition control your life." And I used to say, "Yes, I do," because if I'm trying to give myself the best possibility in the future, you're not. And he used to do recreational drugs whilst taking really strong medication. He used to drink a lot of alcohol, and he used to just abuse his body. We both ended up with a bag, but mine was a planned surgery and his was an emergency surgery.
Right.
So we ended up in the same situation, but it's really interesting about how people, for one, manage their condition, but how they also perceive it when they're trying to manage it.
And I think this is coming across, massively. I think just talking to you here about how you've taken this on board and dealt with it in many respects. And I think that's something that can be taken across to so many different conditions or so many different challenges that people have. We talked about it a lot as a challenge when we chatted the other week about this, and it's a challenge, but it's just a different challenge. It's just something new that you have to deal with in a slightly different way to everybody else, which you can either mourn and be annoyed about and angry about your entire life and be resentful. And again, let's get back to, we'll go back to the GP shortly, but how does that culminate in the end? And ultimately, by letting your condition control your life in many respects, is also giving you the control over your condition, right?
Exactly.
Is it you're in charge?
Yeah, you're in charge. One of the amazing things that I got told was one of my clients had to have chemotherapy, and it was for Crohn's disease. So basically what they do is stem cell transplant, because Crohn's disease and autoimmune conditions are basically the body attacking itself. That's essentially what's happening. Your immune system's too good for your body and it's fighting itself. So what they try and do with stem cell, and it's relatively new research, they try and wipe your DNA structure almost like flat. So then you start again, and then all those antibodies get confused and they stop attacking themselves. And he obviously, due to chemotherapy, lost his hair. And one of the things they said to him, and they do it for cancer as well, they said, shave your head before the condition takes it from you, as a form of empowerment. And one of the things I got told early on was name your stoma. So give your stoma a physical name, because again, it's you taking control and it's empowerment over your condition. And I called my stoma Michael. I called it after my intensive care nurse, because he went above and beyond for me after my surgery, and he would take me out down to the pond in a wheelchair because I couldn't walk. And I thought, that for me was a massive way for me to take control of my condition very early on, and not let it overtake my emotions and not let it get me down. And people do often ask me, like, one of my most common questions is, how do you stay so positive? And one of the best things I ever done was blogging, was writing my emotions down. That completely changed my thought process, because if I was angry, if I was upset, if I was happy, I just wrote them down. I wrote like a journal. And I used to do it. I created like a Facebook page. I actually made Mr. Colitis Crohn's in Southampton Hospital, lying in a hospital bed. Yeah. That was where the idea came initially. And I used to just write all my emotions down on, I think I used to do it as a closed private Facebook page, because I didn't really like pen writing. So I used to type it. And I'd create the posts and I'd post them, but no one would ever see them. And then I led to go into like forums, but I found a lot of forums online were very negative. They were all very like,
I think with any medical condition, I think a lot of, it's a lot of people airing anger and frustration and things like this, which I guess serves a purpose to some degree, but I think it can also change the way that you think, right? Is that, I consciously years ago, I used to, when I first started working in London, in London, they used to, I don't know even whether they still do it because I don't commute anymore, but they used to give away free papers in the morning. And I used to sit and read the paper in the morning, and I'd gone from reading my material, the stuff that the books that I would pick up and take with me, to reading the paper, because I thought, I'm going to start reading the paper. It seems to be what everybody else does. And you do that thing to kind of fit in and do whatever. But I found that I was going into work with this hugely negative outlook on London and the people in London and people in general, because this paper was just all doom and gloom about things that were going wrong. So I just stopped doing it. And again, is this a similar kind of thing? You went into these forums, it was hugely negative, didn't seem to serve you any purpose, so you came back out of them?
Yeah, that and as well as the negative energy I was getting from there, I found that a lot of people were giving poor advice. So like I'm not a dietitian in any sense, but like, as part of my degree, what I studied at university, and I know the body, anatomy and physiology is like, I love the body. And people were saying things, and it was actually frustrating me. And I thought, I don't need to see that. So I removed myself from those groups. And I thought, a lot of people, because I started writing on some of them. I thought, that's not right. I'll write what I think, my viewpoint, which everyone's entitled to a view. And, people started saying to me, you should create your own, you should do something yourself. And I thought, you know what? Why not? What have I got to lose? Like, what have I got to lose, really? in anything you do, you're always going to get people that try and say negative things towards you and try and push down what you're doing. And I've definitely experienced that, like people saying negative things. But for me, like I know what I'm trying to achieve on a personal level, and it's bigger than me. So I just avoid those comments, or make a sample of them, make an example of them, and you know, make a post out of it. Why the hell not?
Yeah.
So I started my own post, and you know, at the beginning, and you'll know yourself, Phil, from doing online stuff, it's not like the red carpet doesn't get rolled out when you first start an online platform. It's like, wait, here you are. It takes a long time. Like I've been posting every day for 5 years, pretty much. And I'll do like 20 to 30 stories every day. And the whole basis around that was answering people's questions, what they were struggling with. And these are like the simplest things, like what does it feel like? Is it painful? How long does it take you to recover? What exercises can I do? What should I be eating? What can't I eat? Just all really simplistic, basic questions, but even from questions like, can you still have sex? You know, because people don't know these things, and they don't want to ask someone face to face. It's not something that you'll ask your doctor, but to ask me on a Q&A basis is easy, because they're behind a screen, and you know, they don't mind, they can relate to me, and they understand what I'm trying to do. And that started as something really small, and obviously now it's grown up to something like over 600,000, which is absolutely mental. But you know, it's all of my basis of the stuff that I do online. All comes back to, everything that comes back to me being sat in hospital, having no one to relate to, having no one to ask the questions to, and I can now answer those questions and bridge that gap between surgery, doctor, and you know, managing a condition.
Crazy.
Yeah, so
it's,
really,
yeah, it's, I mean, just your outlook on everything is incredible. I mean, anybody who's with any condition, you know, whatever it might be, I think your overall outlook and how you manage this is phenomenal. And you know, I think the message that you're relaying across those channels and across those, you know, 500,000 people that you get to converse with on a daily basis is going to be hugely valuable to these people, even if it's just that they take a little bit of your energy or a little bit of the way that you look at things and apply it to their own lives. I think is phenomenal. And just before we kind of wrap up, I want to go back on the GPs.
Yes.
So you had this resentment towards the fact that 3 people, I'm saying 3 people, 3 times you got checked, right?
Yes.
So 3 people had missed out on what ultimately was the problem, right? So where are we at with that? You said you went after them legally. Did you drop that, or was that something that just couldn't be pursued, or was it something that you didn't feel was necessary? Because obviously in the moment, right, you know, you're frustrated, you're annoyed, you want to point blame at somebody. You know, I think with anything that goes wrong, you kind of want to point blame at something or someone or whatever it might be. So at that point, you were pointing blame at the fact that they hadn't spotted this when they should have done.
Yeah.
So what was the outcome of that? Did you forgive them? Did you speak to them? Did you know, was it all just dropped and then just forgotten about, or how did that all pan out?
It kind of, I initially was like very headstrong on getting it sorted. Obviously, these things come with a massive financial load as well. And being a student in my 20s, I didn't have that financial load to progress it. But, you know, they do a lot of these like no win, no fee based things. So I thought, you know, I'm going to give it a go. But unfortunately, a lot of my medical notes got lost in transition. So they couldn't find some of the notes, which ended up long term it being dropped. And, you know, I think when I had to weigh out the option of whether I kept pressing or just got on with my life. Like, it happened now. Nothing was going to change. You know, any sort of bitterness that I had wasn't going to benefit me in any way. You know, I wanted to, at the end of the day, I just wanted to get this part of my life over with and move on. And the only thing that would have come out of me pursuing those doctors is potentially maybe ruining someone else's life when, you know, they could have they just made an accident. Accidents happen. And like, do I need to really ruin those people's lives? Like, that's what I started to think in my mind. Like, the damage is done now. Nothing's going to get me my bowel back. And then it also came to the fact of like, it was just was I doing it just for money? When you sue someone, like, you'll get a financial gain from it. I've never really been one that is that money orientated. So I was like, it got to the point where I was like, it's just causing me more stress. I was in my middle of my degree. I was like, this is where my focus needs to go now. And yeah, I kind of ended up just dropping the whole thing because I just really couldn't be bothered with all the stress.
I think the monetary thing though is ultimately, because obviously people can alter their quality of life through financial means and blah, blah, blah. So I think ultimately when you look at the compensation that people get for things where it's either error, perhaps even a little bit negligence in some cases, in which case it is someone is at fault, someone is at fault here. Whereas, what you might have there is just it might just be, like you said, somebody just made an error. They didn't quite get it right. They didn't quite, figure things out as they were and what have you. So yeah,
accidents happen, really. Accidents do happen, and you can't control everything. That's one thing that I've learned. Like, I used to like to know what's happening when it's happening and always be in control. And when you're living with a medical condition, you can no longer control what's happening to you. What is going to happen is going to happen. So you need to move with that. And things do work out. Like, off the back of me having these surgeries and me having my stoma now, I technically run like 2 businesses. I run my own personal training, so I personal train, and I love doing that. It's what I'm passionate about. And then off the back of that as well, I've also created a medical product that helps people with my condition. And that never would have happened. Those doors never would have opened if I didn't go down the route I have. Like I said at the beginning, I've always been passionate about helping people, and this has enabled me to do it on a huge scale. And the product that I've built, it's functionally what it is to do. It's to protect and prevent hernia and prolapses. So it's essentially a wrap. But I could only design that with living with a stoma and having the experiences myself. Like, I know exactly what materials need to be used. I know that it needs to be wicking and waterproof. There's so many little USPs that I've managed to put on there, that it's enabled me to do that through having the condition. And I never would have been where I am right now unless I had it. So although, yes, it's terrible that what I've been through, would I go back and change it? I probably wouldn't. I can honestly say that I probably wouldn't. Like, I'm comfortable. I'm managing this how I am now, and I get to do all these amazing things. Like, last year, I spoke in front of like 7,000 people. Right now, I'm on a podcast with you. It's opened so many doors for me. So I'm in a weird way kind of grateful, which is a strange way to look at it, like from an outsider's perspective. But I love what I do now.
Hey, look, I'm a massive person who's thoroughly appreciative of hardship. I think my life wouldn't be where it is. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I wouldn't potentially be surrounded by the people I'm surrounded by if it wasn't for hardship. I think that all of the negative things and the challenging things that have occurred in my life certainly, have certainly pushed me down the routes that I've been down. And I think that's the case in so many matters. And I'm sure you won't be the only guest that we have on here that's what that story kind of, the crux of that story revolves around, is that, your hardship, but what you've done is, because you've mentally approached it, I wouldn't say correctly, but I guess in many respects it is correctly. You've approached it for what it is. You've accepted it for what it is. And you've just moved on and got on with what you could get on with. By the sound of it, and again, we touched on it briefly before, there doesn't seem to be anything that seems to hinder anything. You're like, I'm apart from maybe 5 guys is maybe, approach with an air of caution. But apart from that, there doesn't seem to be anything that you don't seem to be coping and managing.
There would be. It does come down to a level of mindset, because there would be people, and I could have very easily done it myself, after either one of those surgeries, just got help from the government and stayed at home in my bedroom and lived with my mum's.
Yeah,
that could have very easily been a reality of mine. That could have happened, but I didn't want that for myself, and I had the people around me in order to lift me up. I have really good friends. I have an amazing family, and those things alone helped get me off the ground and didn't allow me to do that. But I could imagine some people, and I've spoke to people in the past that have had a bag fitted and they completely hate their body. They resent their body, and they've not ever overcome that. I spoke to a gentleman at a talk who has had a stoma for 20 years and he's never touched it. His wife does it for him. Really? And I'm like, you need to at some point talk about these problems, talk about these issues. And, you know, when I go and do talks at these medical conferences, I find it really interesting, particularly when I'm talking to patients, because at the beginning, I never tell them that I've got a stoma. I never tell them. So, and I don't tell a lot of people at the beginning, because, you know, if you saw me in a suit, I don't look like
it becomes the topic then. It's like, you know,
yes.
It's like walking into an event and telling people about all the challenges that you have in life and blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like somebody going, you know, going in and going, look, I'm missing a leg, by the way.
Yeah.
It's not really relevant to, you know, to the conversation. It's not really relevant to, unless of course you're striving for somebody to give you some air of sympathy or create an exception or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah, you don't want to be defined completely by your condition. That's the important thing. Like, a lot of what I do is around my condition. You know, it's to help people. It's raising awareness. It's raising the profile about something that people don't particularly talk about. People are very embarrassed about. So I go, whack, stoma out. This is me. You know, and I'm not ashamed of it in any way. But at the same time, you've got to understand that some people are ashamed of it and don't want to talk about it. And want to keep it under wraps. Yeah. So, like I said, when I'm doing those talks and stuff, quite often I won't say that I've actually got one for a period of time, and people are like, "Wow!" And particularly, I get it at the gym all the time. So when I'm at the gym, we have new clients join because we've got 7 trainers there, and they won't know that I've got one, and then quite often they come across me online or something like that, and they're like, "I never knew, and my such and such has got that," or you know, they always know someone who's got it.
It's crazy, and it's a weird thing, because then all of a sudden that person knows more about you, and then do they start treating you differently, or is it the same? Is it just a level of respect that kind of goes up and blah blah blah? And this is kind of why I said to you, I didn't want to immediately talk about your condition, but your condition is why your mindset and why your outlook on things is so impressive. It's not. That's the context in which it lies. And had we totally avoided that, I could have quite happily probably had a great conversation with you about mindset and all these different things. I said, but we've removed one of the large pieces of context behind that, how incredible that is, and how progressive and how, you know, valuable that is to probably the listeners, the people that are listening, and they're going, well, you know, I've got this, but there's these people with the same conditions, or with people with similar conditions or similar challenges, and their outlook is completely different. And I think that's, you know, the
mindset is so important there, Phil, because like,
huge.
You know, the body is incredible. The body's so smart and it's so technically advanced. It's crazy. But what people don't take into account, and I find this even from an NHS level, there's nothing around the psychology of dealing with a medical condition. So, you know, for me, my body is what it is. My stoma is made, it does its job, it does its function, it knows how to do that. But how do I tell someone, like for instance, my girlfriend, who I met when I've got a bag, that I poo out my stomach? How do I approach that conversation?
How did you approach that?
Well, I just told her. I get people asking that all the time. I'm like, it's at the end of the day, for me, it's a very quick judgment of character. Because if I met her and she had the same, I would say, wow, that's incredible. Please tell me more. And I got a reaction of, oh God. And one of her good friends, who she no longer talks to now, said, oh, I couldn't do that. When she told her, I couldn't do that. And, you know, that's, for me, I find that really sad. And it's not someone who I would want to be associated with. You want to surround yourself with people that are, you know, are supporting your message, but also will be understanding. Like, she was completely understanding. Like, I remember she was like, can I see it? Like, she was really inquisitive. I was like, you know, this one's a keeper, because she understands my condition, and it is just a normal, genuine person. It shouldn't come with any judgment, but the mind and how people view themselves is so important, because, you know, some people will be really embarrassed. They keep their t-shirt on, or, you know, I get that question all the time. How do I approach these certain topics? And it's just one of those things. I think you just come out and say it. Oh, it is what it is. I've got what I've got.
Yeah. And you know, nothing's going to change that. I think the caution there, the cautionary thing that people go through there is that they don't want people to treat them differently, though, do they?
No.
And I think there's always that thing where people almost mollycoddle you a little bit, don't they? Where you're like, you know, you tell them something and then they're like, "Oh, you okay to do this? You okay to?" I'll tell you if I'm okay to do this, and if I'm not, I won't do it.
Yeah, they visualize disability, often, people, as a dirty word.
Yeah.
Disabled doesn't mean unable. It's just a different way of doing something. It's not going to limit you in any way. I classify myself as disabled because when I'm going down, last year I was going to the House of Lords. I got invited to the House of Lords, which was incredible. And I got to meet loads of really high-end doctors there, like one of them being Dr. Shafi, is developing VR headpieces to help people come to terms with medical conditions. So basically, I am going to be an online personal trainer through a digital screen, and someone will go put their VR headset on. I'll be there going, "Hi guys, my name's Mesha. I'm going to be your trainer today." Or I'm going to be the person who desensitizes your condition. So if someone lost a leg, if someone had a stoma fitted, they could look at their body, look down at their body, and a stoma would be there. So they can visualize that before it's even happened. You know, that is incredible. Or if someone lost a leg, they can look down at their body without a leg being there and understand what their new body is going to look like. And those kind of things are incredible. But I remember when I was driving to that event, I had to pull over off the motorway very quickly because my bag had leaked. I had to park on the other side of the car park because I'm not entitled to a disabled badge. And I had to run across the car park, run to the disabled toilet with my bag leaking. And for me, I'm like, that for me is my disability. Like, you know, I have to, it's the management of it requires disabled facilities, but it doesn't hinder me in, like, you know, in any other way, and people shouldn't judge you in any other way.
Yeah. And I think with stuff like that, I mean, parking, let's talk very briefly on something kind of, the parking thing is that with stuff like that, I think, personally, is that somebody like yourself, you would take advantage of that. If you're a disabled badge, you take advantage of the fact that you can utilize those parking places if you need them.
Yes.
Is the days that you don't need them, you don't park in them because, you want to stay active, you want to stay, and I think, again, that's that mentality, right? It's that how do I approach things? And ultimately I've got opportunity to use something that other people don't have the opportunity to use to assist and alleviate my condition, and to help me with it when I need that help. But ultimately, the majority of the time, because you've got it all managed, you don't need that help. So therefore, you just park where everybody else parks, right?
Yes.
And and again, it's another example of the outlook. Look, we've been chatting now for about 95 minutes, I think it is. I could chat with you for another 95 more. I think Mesha, your story is fantastic. You're a fantastic character. You've got an incredible mindset for stuff. You epitomize, what we're about, which is living on form. And you have this life of discipline. You do the things that ultimately result in the output that you want. And that is commendable. It's, it thoroughly is. So thank you for your time. Hopefully we can continue this conversation at some point. I'm sure our listeners will thoroughly appreciate what you've shared with us, and thank you for sharing that, because again, it's, you don't have to, it's something you seem very open to doing, and thank you for your time once again.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's a great opportunity.
Cool. And we'll speak again soon.
Yes, thank you, Phil.
Bye for now.